So there are lots of different sorts of logical arguments given by Ramana and the scriptures as to why the world does not exist. The problem is, none of these logical arguments can be proven to be true. You cannot logically prove that the world is an illusion from within the waking state. And you cannot prove that it is not an illusion. You know, someone can argue this world is real. I can see it, I can feel it, I can touch it, I can breathe it in, and I can experience it. And other people can corroborate what I am seeing, feeling, etc. And they will argue the world is real. Then someone else can say, well, that's the same as a dream. You know, you've just described what happens in a dream, but when you wake up from a dream, that's just a dream. And someone else can say, well, this could be a simulation. You can't argue against it. But what happens if you have faith in Ramana's teachings? You have to accept his. If you have faith, you might not have faith in his teachings, but if you have faith in the teachings, and not just his teachings, the whole of the Vedanta teachings, which say the same thing, what you have to do, you have to accept the reasoning that the Guru gives you, and take it as your own, and use that reasoning to guide you in your practice. If you do not have faith in those reasonings, it doesn't matter. You don't. Even if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have faith for the teachings to work initially. What you can do, you can turn within and abide as the self, and then you will discover for yourself that this world is an illusion, and that there is no world during deep sleep. You discover it for yourself. You don't need the faith. But the utility of faith is that most people don't want to turn within and abide as a self. So the thing that makes you do that is usually two things. One, faith. So you follow the Guru's teachings. And two, fear, which is you suffer in the world and you grow weary and afraid of the world, and so you turn away from it. Ramana says, and the Vedanta teachings say, you cannot get long-term happiness or sustained happiness from temporary objects, which makes sense, correct? If something's temporary, it won't give you lasting happiness, lasting peace. It's like building a house. It's like building a mansion on sand. The sand is a very poor foundation to build for a sturdy base for a building. In the same way, if you're looking for lasting peace and happiness, then fleeting objects, which is all objects, is a very shaky foundation. So Ramana often says, if you read some of his talks, he'll often say, where was it in deep sleep? Was it there in deep sleep? And the answer is always no, unless you're talking about the self. So people come to him and say, I had this wonderful experience. I saw flashing lights, and I saw Shiva, and I saw Krishna, and I saw Jesus, and it was a wonderful experience. And then they'll say to him, what value does this have? Or was that liberation? And then he'll say, this vision you had, this experience, was it there in deep sleep? Which is a very strange question. But when you understand the logic he's putting forward, and they'll say, no, it's not there in deep sleep. He goes, well, then it's not permanent. And they're okay then. Now, he usually doesn't say anything more than that. He doesn't even say it's not permanent. He just says, well, if it's not there in deep sleep, it's not real. But the implication is that if it's not there in deep sleep, then it's transient. It's something that comes and goes. And therefore, it's not worth pursuing, because it will lead to more suffering. Because what you are is ever present throughout the three states: waking, dream, and deep sleep. So the point of the teachings is to turn you towards the self. The self is the happiness of deep sleep, the bliss of deep sleep. That's what you are. Ramana says so in the first paragraph of Ramana, and it's also a teaching from the Upanishads, the ancient texts, the oldest of the Upanishads. The longest and oldest of the Upanishads, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, has this teaching of deep sleep. It tells you the self is in deep sleep. Brahman, you are Brahman, self, God. Does that answer your question, Fran, or did I?
No, it's beautiful as always. It was beautiful. It's so direct. You're reminding me, and it is the ego that wants to know everything and thinking that there's a party up the street.
Yeah. But what it is really is that you don't want to abide as a self. You enjoy doing what you're doing, and that's fine. You know, I'm not criticizing anyone who's doing that. I'm just saying I'm just describing that's the reality. So when you really want to abide as a self, then nothing will stop you. But when you don't really want to, you're going to be on the level of the mind. There's going to be confusion. There's going to be doubts. There's going to be more seeking. The best way to increase your motivation to abide as the self is to abide as the self. And I'll explain that to you. When you start to do it, it starts to feel very good. And when it really sort of starts to click, this is when it really encourages you. So, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Everything else I was doing was nothing. It was so super. You start to realize that everything else, all the other inquiry, all the other reading, that's all superficial nonsense. Very difficult to realize that unless you abide as the self. It's like I can talk about the world being an illusion. It's very hard to realize that in the waking state, the normal waking state. Once you start abiding as the self, it's like, oh gosh, this is all an illusion. This is all a dreamlike illusion. But unless you do that, then the teachings, you might enjoy the teachings, but they remain superficial. So one of the best ways of doing it is to abide as a self. If you can't do that, then come to these kinds of meetings. Because these are reminding you, this is persuading you, this is convincing you. But this is why Shankara says in Vivekachudamani, he says, it's good to listen to the teachings. Even better is to reflect upon and think about and contemplate the teachings. Even better is to meditate upon the teachings. But best of all is samadhi. Samadhi means to abide as the self in this context. Best of all is samadhi, which is infinite in its results. This is good to listen, good to think about the teachings, good to reflect upon the teachings. Even better is it to meditate. But best of all is samadhi, meaning better than reading the teachings, better than listening to the teachings, better to thinking about the teachings. Abide as the self.